I'm going to read now an appreciation from 2004 to Bishop Lamont, written by a fellow Carmelite in Ireland and published in Causa Nostra Laetitia during 2004. And it gives a brief account of his life and his work as a bishop in Zimbabwe and after his years of retirement. Bishop Donal Lamont was born in Ballycastle, County Antrim, in 1911. He completed his secondary education at Terranure College, entered the Carmelite order in Kinsale in 1929, and was professed in 1930. He studied at UCD, where he obtained an MA in English. He pursued his theological studies in Rome, where he took his STL, and he was ordained priest in 1937. In 1946, he set out with two other Carmelites, Luke Flynn and Anselm Corbett, to work in what was then southern Rhodesia. Within a decade, there was a thriving mission there. He was appointed as the first superior of the Carmelite mission in Rhodesia in 1953, and in the same year, he was appointed prefect apostolic. In 1957, he was appointed first bishop of Umtali, now Mutari. The diocese covered the eastern highlands of Rhodesia, extending along the Mozambique border for some 400 miles. As bishop, he presided over great developments in the Catholic life of the diocese. For him, there was always a mission, something to be done. He encouraged African vocations, and in 1959 founded a congregation of African sisters, handmaids of Our Lady of Mount Carmel. He was also responsible for the introduction to the diocese of other sisters and priests to help in the pastoral, educational, and health care of many missions. Priests from Kiltegan and the Diocese of Killaloe were invited to work there. Concerned about the Church's mission to preach the gospel for all the people and to all the people dominated by his thinking and actions. Engaging and articulate, he displayed immense energy as he denounced the racial discrimination that prevailed and which flagrantly violated human rights. In 1959, in his first pastoral letter, A Purchased People, he said, "The Church, through her bishops, must speak no matter what the fears, what the opposition, what the criticism. Unless she does, the notion of Almighty God having anything to do in the affairs of nations and individuals may be lost, and the ideal of social order based on the Christian principles of justice and charity may be abandoned as an unrealistic, impractical, visionary illusion." This pastoral has been recognized as a classic on racial injustice and was translated into 14 languages. It provoked the Western world into an awareness of what was happening in southern Africa. Bishop Lamont came from the missions for the first session of the Vatican Council. A comprehensive schema on the work of the missions did not seem to have been provided for. Bishop Lamont expressed grave reservations to the fact that there were a series of propositions rather than a full mission document. Always able to find the words to match the images of his mind, his dramatic intervention from the floor of the Vatican Council was greeted with applause. It was a seminal episode and resulted in a completely rewritten document ad gentes. In 1962, Bishop Lamont was elected member of the Secretariat for the Promotion of Christian Unity, and he served as a member for 13 years. Back home in Rhodesia, he fostered that ecumenical spirit. In the difficult situation of southern Rhodesia, soon to be Zimbabwe, he fostered ecumenical links at grassroots level and with church leaders, in particular Bishop Abel Muzorewa of the American Methodist Church, as well as Garfield Todd, the Prime Minister before 1965, who was a Church of Christ pastor. Health and education were areas in which ecumenical cooperation was most fruitful. In 1965, with a unilateral declaration of independence from Britain, the Ian Smith regime soon became guilty of violating the rights of the majority of the population. The native Rhodesian, although in the majority, had no share in decision-making or legislation. It concerned the bishop that the ethics of power was about how you obtained consent. The passing of the Land Tenure Act in 1969 brought about a confrontation between church and state. The native Africans were driven from the richer areas of land. The people of Rhodesia were now segregated territorially and on a racial basis. Bishop Lamont was chairman of the Bishops' Conference 1970 to 1972 and president of the Catholic Commission for Justice and Peace in Rhodesia from 1974 until his expulsion. As chairperson of the Bishops' Conference, he challenged the act, denouncing the racial discrimination that prevailed. Concerned about fundamental issues, he predicted that racial discrimination would bring about massive discontent. The bishop became more vocal in his opposition to racism and the white minority government. The Justice and Peace Commission of the Catholic Church investigated and published the details of the injustices perpetrated by the racist regime. In order to seek redress for the situation, he used his pastoral letters, open letters to the government and the international forum to highlight the injustices of the social system then in existence. Bishop Lamont saw his commitment to social justice as part of the message of the Church. If the government did not address the issues, then the result would be violence, and communism would become an attractive alternative. While avoiding any involvement in politics, he came to know Joshua Nkomo and Robert Mugabe. The war years. The Civil War commenced in 1972. Executions of freedom fighters soon followed. Subsequently, he contributed to joint pastoral letters which were consigned and issued in the name of all the Rhodesian bishops. The booklets such as The Man in the Middle and Civil War in Rhodesia, which I have just mentioned, were published by the Catholic Commission for Justice and Peace. It was inevitable that there would be head-on confrontation with the government. On the morning after the bombing of Umtali, he wrote an open letter to the government. It was characterized by candor and compassion. Conscience compels me to state that your administration, by its clearly racial and oppressive policies, and by its stubborn refusal to change, is largely responsible for the injustices which have provoked the present disorder, and it must be in that measure be considered guilty of whatever misery and bloodshed may follow. He went on, no wonder the oppressed people, made marginal in society in their own country, have welcomed and continue to welcome those men they call freedom fighters and whom you call terrorists. This stinging condemnation was not well received in government quarters. He would remind people that the church didn't condone violence any more than it would ignore its causes. His procrastinations of the doom that would follow current government policy were greatly resented. Shortly after this letter of protest, August 26th, he was charged under the Law and Order Maintenance Act with permitting some sisters under his jurisdiction to administer medicine to guerrilla fighters. He had also advised the sisters not to report the matter to the state authority. At his trial, he defended the morality of his decision not to act as an informer and not to refuse medical assistance to anyone, regardless of religion or politics. He spoke for hours, in which he outlined his personal history and gave a devastating critique of the Smith regime and his policies. The speech was subsequently published as Speech from the Dock. He had pleaded guilty to the charges, thereby preventing anyone else from incriminating themselves by testifying on his behalf. On October 76, he was sentenced to 10 years hard labor. His sentence was later reduced to 4 years, with 3 years suspended. Then he was deprived of his Rhodesian citizenship. A German TV crew who visited Umtali at the time had been advised by Sutton Price, Director of Information, that Lamont was a Catholic bishop and a communist. When it was decided to deport him, he appealed. The decision on the grounds that he represented the Holy See in caring for the spiritual needs of the Diocese of Umtali. He was placed under house arrest for 2 months, and in the meantime, his appeal was rejected. On March 23rd, 1977, a Rhodesian immigration official brought him to Salisbury Airport and put him on a plane for London. During his exile, he lectured extensively. The richness of his personality was obvious to all. He was evangelical and passionate, funny, and had great sense of humor. He was the recipient of an honorary Doctor of Law from Notre Dame University. A fellow recipient was Jimmy Carter. He also received honorary doctorates from Seton Hall University, Marymount College, Manhattan, and Mount St. Mary's University. He was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize in 1978. He had earned his place in the hearts and minds of the people of so many nations. The government of Kenya issued a commemorative postage stamp in 1979 in recognition of his work for the people of Africa. In 1980, after independence, Bishop Lamont returned to Umtali diocese and remained there until a successor was appointed in 1982, after which he became Bishop Emeritus of Umtali. As bishop, he was a man of energy, brooding little opposition when he felt he was in the right. His episcopal motto was, Ut placiam Deo, that I may please God. He always prayed that the Zimbabwe of the future would give encouraging life, would give enduring life to his vision. And that article was written by Father Christopher O'Donnell.